that every one of them has an expiration date like we do. And it's been something that we've wondered about, and it's bothered us. We've invented ways to deny it. But in the last 50 years, molecular biology has advanced to the point that we're understanding the underlying causes of why we age and die. In other words, what starts breaking down and why does it break down, and what are the processes that are affected? And then this leads to the question of whether we can do something about it. And that comes from two angles. One is, as I said, all societies are living longer, so there's a real need to have healthy aging on part of the population, and that's what governments all over the developed world are trying to do research in aging to see if we can age more healthily. And at the same time, there are these people who really think that death is a problem, we should try to eliminate it or at least postpone it and extend our lives dramatically. And that's one end of the spectrum. So all of this stuff is coming together, and so there's a lot of activity in the field.
Yeah. Let me ask you, this is a dangerous question to ask a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, but what I love about your book, so I think you can handle this, what I love about your book is that it's accessible. I say all the time, Vinky, that I love having brilliant guests on this program, certainly those in the academy, but oftentimes they don't have what I would call a usable intellect. You got to be able to break this stuff down for the everyday people like yours truly and those listening and watching to be able to understand this. And so what I love about your book is that your intellect is usable, and you explain these things in a way that even people like yours truly can understand. So I wonder if I can just pause for a second or pivot for a second and ask you to explain in a way that I can understand it and the way that all of us can understand it, what does in fact happen to our bodies. The book is called Why We Die. So tell me if you tell me in a way that I can understand and embrace why we die. What happens?
Okay, so think of us, we're a collection of molecules inside each of our cells, and then each of our tissues is a collection of those cells, and then we're a collection of all our tissues. So there's whole levels of organization, very much like, you could have, districts, and then you could have states, and then you could have a country, and then you'd have a world, and there are different levels of organization. Now, what happens is that as time goes by, the molecules in our cells that make everything happen is actually subject to all kinds of damage, chemical damage, and just damage over time. And that chemical damage accumulates. And when that accumulates, things stop working because the molecules don't function the way they're supposed to function because they're not working, or they're not produced at the time they're supposed to be made, or they're not destroyed at the time they're supposed to be destroyed. So all of this complicated process gets disrupted. Now, what this leads to is the death of cells. Now, that shouldn't normally be a problem because as we live, millions of cells in us are dying all the time, and we don't even notice it. But the fact is that when it accumulates to a point where critical cells stop working, for example, if critical cells in your heart or your brain stop working, then you die. So that's sort of the whole process in a nutshell. Now, I'd like to point out two interesting things about it. One is, as I said, cells in our body are dying all the time. It doesn't mean we're done. We're fine. Mm-hmm. Okay? But the flip side is also true. When you die, most of the cells in your body are alive. In fact, most of your organs are still alive. You could donate them. If you signed your driver's license accordingly, you could be an organ donor after you died, right? So it's a paradox. Things are dying in us while we're alive, and when we die, most of us are still alive. So what does it mean when we die? It means that we can't function as an individual anymore. We don't have that coherence, that consciousness to function as a whole individual. That's what goes when we die.
Yeah. Now you got me. Now you got my mind really, really twisting and turning here. I never thought about it in that regard. So that when we die, to your point, most of our cells are still living. That is an interesting paradox, to use your word. What do you make, as a chemist, of that paradox?
It means that we're a complex system, and some systems are more critical than others for things to function. So, if I may give an example with societies,
Sure.
let's say let's say you have an earthquake here or a flood there. It doesn't mean that society will collapse, but if in a war the government were to collapse, then you would have a breakdown of society. So it's the same sort of thing. If you have a critical system that fails, like our heart or brain, then the whole body then basically gives up.
Hmm. I wonder, and I don't want to color this question much more than this. It's I'm asking it broadly, unapologetically, and deliberately. But I'm wondering whether or not you think that most people, around the globe, have a clear-eyed view of death. And it seems to me that if we don't have a clear-eyed view of what death is and how we approach it and what it means, et cetera, then that impacts any conversation we have, including this one, about what it means to engage in efforts to greatly extend lifespan, which, as you argued earlier, in some ways deprives our lives of urgency and meaning and a desire to make every day count. Again, back to my question, whether or not you think that most of us have a clear-eyed view of death.
I think most people would agree that death is really our loss of existence as a conscious being.
Hmm.
A permanent loss of existence as a conscious being. It means we can't function as an individual anymore. I think most people have that intuitive understanding. Of course, throughout our history, we've not really accepted that. We've not accepted that finality. In fact, if you look at all societies, all religions, they're all about how to transcend death. We might, uh, be born again. Come up, actually bodily, be resurrected, or we might have an immortal soul, or things like that. So I think we tend to deny death, which you mentioned early in the program. But I think deep down we know what death means. It means that we won't exist as conscious beings.
Hmm. On more than one occasion now, you have talked about, and made clear that it may or may not be worth all the effort that we are engaging in to extend and expand our lives. But certainly, none of us can disagree with the fact that we should be engaged in efforts to age more healthily. What exactly does that mean, though?
Okay, so today we live twice as long as we did 100 years ago on average. But the fraction of our lives that we live unhealthily has not changed in the last 50 years
Mm.
or so. So we're living longer because we're better at curing cancer, treating diabetes, treating heart disease. So we've extended our lives from, say, the 60s to now into our 80s in the Western world. And the problem there is that this last part of life, that's is still not very healthy. And so the question is, as we age, can we maintain our health? Now, there is a paradox here again, and that is nobody knows whether if we do that, we're simply going to postpone that period
Mm.
when we're unhealthy. Because the alternative is that we continue to be in excellent health and then suddenly break down. Well, this is like if a car is functioning perfectly well, why would it suddenly break down? So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So I
sure.
think there nobody has really solved, nobody has really addressed that problem to my satisfaction. They all assume that there's going to be a fixed endpoint and that we'll simply improve our lives as we age. But in the past, when they've improved various health problems, they've also extended our lives. So I think it's not clear whether we're simply going to postpone that inevitable decay,
Yeah.
or whether we're going to actually live really healthily and then rapidly decline and die.
To those who believe, listening to this conversation, that ultimately we are doing just that, prolonging, extending the inevitable, how would you respond to those who say, for all the things that we could be focusing on in science, for all the things that our tax dollars, for example, in this country and elsewhere, for that matter, could be funding, because we know that we are born and at some point we are going to die, it is inescapable, that we're wasting a lot of time and spending a lot of money trying to figure out how to prolong the inevitable, and that's not the best use of our resources or, frankly, our time. How would you respond to those who feel that way?
I think it's a perfectly valid comment, and in fact, in the book, I have said that uh, one guy, Bill Gates, I talk about billionaires.
Sure.
Many of them are investing. Many of these tech billionaires, many of them from California, where I believe you live. Uh, they, these guys, don't like their lives, and they don't want to end. They don't want the party to end,
Yeah.
and they're funding a lot of this, aging and longevity research. Now, one exception is Bill Gates. Now, he's trying to tackle childhood diseases, infectious diseases, things like that through his foundation. Paradoxically, he might have a bigger effect on average life expectancy by lifting up the bottom end, people in poor countries with poor health, helping those people. So there's always a balance. But I do think that we're aging as a society anyway. People are living longer anyway. So I do think it is important to try and see how can we make sure that people are healthy in old age for as long as possible. I think that is a worthy goal.
I'm not naive in asking this question, and to some extent, you've kind of already opined on it. But I do want to drill down a little bit more, perhaps, and that is, how do you read? How should we read that a bunch of billionaires, many of them in California, as you mentioned, but a bunch of billionaires are the ones who are funding this kind of research? I can do a whole commentary, I suspect, just on that. But you're the Nobel Prize winner. You're the world-renowned chemist. How do you read that reality?
Well, I'm not too worried about it because I'll tell you for two reasons. One is that most of the funding for aging research still comes from governments. It doesn't come from these billionaires. I mean, yes, they're putting a lot of money into it, but a lot of the really fundamental research is still funded by NIH, or in Britain, it's the Medical Research Council and organizations like that, and for very good reasons, which is to promote healthy aging and to also to understand what actually happens when we age. I mean, that's a very important biological question. So I'm not too worried about them. The other reason I'm not worried about them is they can use their money to buy scientists, but scientists like to do what they like to do, and so they're going to continue to do good research and try to find out interesting things and maybe come up with interesting solutions. So I think it's okay. I just view it with some amusement. That's all.
Yeah. I like that word, amusement. And my view is a little bit different. I want to unpack this when we come forward. I hear your point about being amused by it, but the flip side of that is a conversation about what I would call how might I put it, the democratization of death. The democratization of death. Death, in many ways, is very democratizing. You can be Steve Jobs with all the money in the world, but when it's your time, it's your time. I want to get into that part of the conversation with the Nobel winner, Venki Ramakrishnan. His new book is called Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. Much more to uncover when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive, unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know the United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time? Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Widespread damage is being reported after storms roared across central Texas Wednesday night. A mall in the town of Temple was damaged, along with some homes and businesses. A small plane was blown over at the Temple airport. Trees and power lines were knocked down, and widespread power outages were being reported. A senior advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says she's leaving his independent presidential campaign because of what she calls a hateful and divisive atmosphere. Angela Stanton King, who is African American, announced her departure as the campaign's head of black voter outreach, saying the campaign no longer aligns with her values. King wrote on social media that she'll continue to advise RFK Jr. on key community issues. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
At age 39, LeBron became the oldest player to be chosen to an All-NBA team. LeBron was a third-team selection when the NBA handed out its awards for outstanding play. In 20 of LeBron's 21 seasons, he has been voted to an All-NBA team. Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard were All-NBA second-team selections. The first team, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jason Tatum. The Dallas Mavericks take Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. They beat Minnesota by 3 in Minneapolis. Doncic and Kyrie Irving combined for 63 points. Game 2 is Friday night in Minneapolis. The Dodgers got shut out for the third time this season. They lost by 6 at home to Arizona. The Dodgers were 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position. The Angels beat Houston. The Angels are 5-5 in their last 10 games. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. Shopping for new blinds? At Blindster, we offer over 50 different blinds, shades, and shutters at low prices, custom made for your windows, and shipping is free. Shop at home and order 10 free samples of any product before you buy. Blindster.com.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
We used to argue about whose turn it was to clean the gutters, but then I had leaf filter gutter protection installed.
Wait, I told you Leaf Filter had free inspections and estimates and a lifetime guarantee.
Meaning we never have to argue about whose turn it is to clean the gutters again.
But I visited leaffilter.com/beacon first.
No, I did.
It doesn't matter who. Visit leaffilter.com/beacon to schedule your free gutter inspection and get up to 30% off today.
See representative for warranty details. Promotion is 20% off plus a 10% senior or military discount. One discount per household.
When you use Bounce dryer sheets and your clothes look amazing, it's the sheet. Less static in your life? Yeah, it's the sheet. Smelling fresher than ever? It's the sheet. Oh, so soft fabric? Ooh la la. It's the sheet. Less wrinkles on your clothes? You know it's the sheet. Bounce dryer sheets. More freshness, more softness. Less static, less wrinkles. It's the sheet.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Tavis Smiley and Venki Ramakrishnan, winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, with a provocative and insightful new book called Why We Die: The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. Venki Ramakrishnan, you'll be happy to know that moments ago during that break, there was a spirited conversation here in this radio studio. All of my producers and board ops and others ran into the studio to offer their point of view on what they're hearing, all kind of perspective. I'm checking our socials. People are commenting and asking questions and sending me stuff. So you have kicked up. Speaking of the word amusement, I am now amused at the conversation you've kicked up in a variety of ways. So let me make the most of my time in this last half hour and try to squeeze in some of all the stuff that's coming at me, even as we talk, that people want me to ask you. Let me start with what I mentioned a moment ago, and that is this notion of how democratizing death has been. Clearly, we don't all die from the same thing. We don't all die at the same age. I get all that. Nobody's naive about that. But there is something that has been rather democratizing about death. We are born, and at some point we do that dance with mortality, and we die. But if we start or continue this effort to extend our lifespan, I think you're right about the fact that it does in fact deprive us of urgency and meaning and living a life that matters and making each day count. I get that. But also, as these billionaires are involved in this longevity science domain, and they potentially get access to stuff that poor people don't have access to, you see my point, it raises a serious question, I think, about the democratization of death. Your thoughts?
It's an excellent point, and it's one that I go to in the book at some length. And the problem is that at one level, death is democratic, but it's already the case that it's very undemocratic. Because if you look at the top 10% earners, even in rich countries like the U.S. and the U.K., and the U.K., I should point out, has National Health Service, so everybody's entitled to reasonable health care. In spite of that, the top 10% live more than a decade or almost 2 decades sometimes longer than the bottom 10%. Now, I mentioned this to my stepdaughter in Queens, who's in public health. She's a doctor who works in public health, especially with poorer communities. She said it's even worse. If you look at the zip code in New York City, the difference between the longest living zip code and the shortest living zip code, and this is average life, of course, is 35 years. Now, not all of this is due to aging. Some of it is due to bad health care, due to various other problems, accidents, crime, all sorts of things. But nevertheless, it shows you that it's an uneven field even now. And it is true that if these new breakthroughs result in very sophisticated treatments to extend life, then who will have who will have access to those treatments?
That part.
And it's always the case. It's always the case that when new advances come along, whether it's heart transplant or the latest cancer treatment, it's always rich countries and the people who can afford it who get first access. I mean, that's just how it's been historically. And I would expect that to be the case here too. And what it'll do is it will de-democratize longevity in the sense that you might get rich people simply living longer and longer compared to poor people, and widening that gap.
Yep. To your mind, now I'm getting some of the questions that others have asked me to pose to you. To your mind, is there, and if so, what is the dark side of what is called longevity science?
Well, I think the dark side, there isn't a particularly dark side, but what has happened is that because it plays on something we're all anxious about. We're all anxious about aging, about dying. So it's led to a lot of dubious practices, people selling all kinds of remedies. Some of them might have some vague relationship to some scientific article or some finding, but has not really been tested in humans for long-term efficacy, things like that. So it just encourages, I wouldn't want to say snake oil because some of it is snake oil, but there's a whole spectrum. Some of it is based on research, but it's not really ready for prime time because it hasn't gone through clinical trials and proper evidence gathering. So, there's a whole range of practices. At the very extreme end, it's snake oil, and then in the middle, it's somewhat dubious or maybe jumping the gun a bit. So that's how it is.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this. I think you and I agree on this. They will not be testing on the rich people who are funding these billionaires in California and beyond who are funding all this longevity science. They won't be testing on them. I can assure you of that. Speaking of which,
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, tell me why. Tell me why.
The reason is you may know of this tech billionaire named Brian Johnson. This guy is from California. He spends $2 million a year trying out every, plausible longevity thing on himself. Okay?
Right.
And he collects a huge amount of data and does all the things that, aging researchers feel might be useful. So he's willing to be a guinea pig himself, and he claims that he's sort of pioneer in longevity. So I think, if you raise the prospect of living longer, I think you might find their attitudes change, and they might want to be the first ones to try because they don't want to wait around because they feel that if they wait around, it might be too late.
Yeah. How do you respond to those who say that this entire field of exploring new sciences about how we extend our lifespan is in fact anti-moral, is in fact anti-God? I believe that science and God can coexist. But for those who see this kind of research and these efforts as anti-moral and anti-God, you would say what?
I would say that they should realize that most of aging research is not about extending life. It's really about making sure that you don't get these debilitating problems as you age, all the arthritis, the joint ache, all the illnesses that come with old age. So it's about trying to see if we can do something about those things. And I think I have sympathy for that. If you go to a care home and look at people and how dependent they are, how they're suffering, I think it's not a bad idea to try and do something about that.
Do you have thoughts, Venki Ramakrishnan, about what's called transhumanism? I was just reading an article the other day about these efforts to essentially, as I understand it, combine humans and machines together to extend life to some crazy number. Your thoughts about that field of that arena of transhumanism?
So my thought is, this is another darling of the tech billionaire community because they think of everything as some sort of computing problem. And they think of the brain as just another kind of computer. The reality is we don't really understand the brain all that well. We don't even understand, some of the most basic things the brain does in real detail. And So the idea that somehow you can take whatever is in your brain and dump it to a computer and thereby extend your consciousness forever or for a very long time, it's just pure science fiction at this point.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When we come forward, a few more questions that we have for Venki Ramakrishnan, and I could have begun our conversation, could have commenced with this, but there are many of you who are curious, and so forgive me for not asking. It wasn't central to the conversation, but it is a question that I want to ask. People are curious as to he is of course a winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, but what for? What exactly did he do for which he won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry? We'll get that answer as well when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, Tavis Smiley here. We're getting closer to June 18th, and time is running out for you to register to join us for our historic symposium live on C-SPAN, Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Admission is free, but you must register at KBLA1580.com right now if you want to be in the audience when the nation will see for the first time ever a stage full of brilliant black folk talking about the urgency of now. Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. It's all going down. Well, it's actually all going up. Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. live from the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Again, admission is free, but we're filling up fast. So if I were you, I would log on right now to KBLA1580.com to reserve your seat. Caring about the climate, caring about the community. We're KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
What make you? Yeah.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed, as we continue talking about this provocative new book called Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality, written by our esteemed guest in this hour, Venki Ramakrishnan. Venki, for those who are curious as to your Nobel Prize in Chemistry, which I'm just bowing down at the notion of having a conversation with one of your brilliance, can you explain in a way that we can understand what the Nobel Prize was for?
It was basically for understanding the process by which the information in our genes is used to make proteins. because every gene basically contains information to make a particular protein, and we have thousands of proteins in us. Now, the average person, when they think of proteins, they think of it something that we have to have in our diet. It makes us strong, or they think it's what builds our muscles. That's all true, but that's only a very small fraction of what proteins do. Proteins carry out all of the complicated functions of life, and every one of them is made by looking at the instructions on how to make them, which is present in our genes. And the molecule, or the complex, the big machine that does it, is called the ribosome. So my colleagues and I worked on figuring out how this machine, well, first of all, what does it look like, and then also how does it do its complicated protein synthesis. And so that's why three of us shared the Nobel Prize. But I should say there were, apart from my own team, there were lots of people who contributed to it. But, the Nobel Committee often has the unenviable job of picking out three people at the most for a field.
Well, we congratulate you and your colleagues on that high honor, high honor. One final thing on these billionaires. We've been talking about these billionaires and their pursuit of immortality. I'm reading from Vox. It's a story in Vox called, if you want to read it for yourself, "The Real Science Behind the Billionaire Pursuit of Immortality." That's the headline. The real science behind the billionaire pursuit of immortality. Let me read one quick paragraph. "A longer, healthier life is one of the easiest products in the world to sell. According to a Deloitte report, the 50 biggest longevity companies raised more than $1 billion in venture capital funding as of 2020, a number that the company said would rise due to the growing conviction that the longevity market could outstrip the existing healthcare market." Y'all didn't hear me. The growing conviction that the longevity market could outstrip the existing healthcare market. Altos Labs, a rejuvenation biotech whose investors include some guy named Jeff Bezos, announced in 2022 that they had raised $3 billion in funding. Your quick comment, Vinky, about that?
Well, it turns out there are actually about 700 startup companies in the last decade alone, and they've raised an aggregate of tens of billions of dollars. So there is a lot of money sloshing around. Yeah. And I think people see there's a big demand because everybody's aging, everybody's getting old. Yeah. So it's not simply about life extension, like I pointed out. Sure. But of course, there's an element of that, of wanting to live longer and possibly many times our current age. Yeah. I think, it sounds like a lot of money, but if you look at the total biotech enterprise, it's only it's like 10% of the biotech.
No, I received that point. I guess the part that jumps out at me though, knowing what a behemoth, it's a bizarre. Don't get me started. The healthcare market is what I'm talking about. That this longevity market could outstrip the existing healthcare market, given the behemoth that it is. That's what's startling about this. Our remaining moments with Vinky Ramakrishnan when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful they saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Stay Housed LA has the resources you need to know your rights and the legal support to back them up. The COVID-19 pandemic has cost people their jobs and livelihoods. This has left an estimated 1/3 of households not being able to make rent and facing losing their homes. This is a fear no one in our community should have to face. You have rights, though, and Stay Housed LA is here to help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and local community and legal service providers. Together, they provide tenants with the information and support needed to exercise their rights so they can remain safely in their homes. Find out more about your rights by participating in a virtual tenant workshop. Get the legal assistance you need. Find additional resources in Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA County for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. That's stayhousedla.org. Or call their hotline at 213-694-0040. We've got your black with a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Venki Ramakrishnan, winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. His new book is called Why We Die: The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. Venki, we've discussed a lot in this hour that I've enjoyed immensely, learned a great deal, and yet I can't do justice to all this in this book in 60 minutes. But to your mind, what do you hope the takeaways are?
Well, there are two takeaways. One is I want people to understand the science behind aging, because it's something we've wondered about for centuries. Why do we actually age and die? So it's a way to empower the public by giving them that understanding. That way, they can do two things. One is they can take action in their own lives to do the kinds of things that will keep them healthier for longer without being a recipe book. It's really coming from a place of understanding. Mm-hmm. The other is every time they see a news article or listen to something on the radio or television about some next new finding or some new thing, they have a way to ask, does this make sense? Is this fit into what I know about the biology of aging and death? And so they'll have a way to filter information as it comes around. So it's really a way to empower the general reader, because as we pointed out, there's so much hype in the field. Even that article you mentioned saying it's going to overtake other forms of health care, I think that to me sounds like hype, you know. And so this is a way to empower the reader so they can, first of all, live their own lives better, but also be able to judge what's going on around them.
Yeah. I got a quick 30 seconds here. To what extent do we indict markets and industries, I'm saying that broadly, for being complicit in the fact that as we live these days, we are less healthy? People aren't doing this without, it ain't like they're being pushed or helped or aided and abetted in that process.
Oh, I think, the whole system encourages unhealthy lifestyle.
Yes.
I point out the best things you can do: a good diet, regular exercise, and adequate sleep. But our industrial society makes it hard to do any of those three things, just because of the way it pushes things on us.
Fair enough. Venki Ramakrishnan, thank you for your work. Thank you for your witness. Thank you for this book, Why We Die, The New Science of Aging and the Quest for Immortality. He is winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. What a delight to have had you on, sir. Thank you for your time. All the best to you.
Thank you.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward. We'll celebrate the jazz men. Talk about how Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie transformed America with the author of the new book, Larry Tye, on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Widespread damage is being reported after storms roared across central Texas Wednesday night. A mall in the town of Temple was damaged, along with some homes and businesses. A small plane was blown over at the Temple Airport. Atmosphere. Angela Stanton King, who is African American, announced her departure as the campaign's